E shape, G chord, pentatonic, and major scale position 2, or E shape, G chord scale position. Get ready because it's time to rock and or roll. Here we are in our Excel worksheet where we have the top string on top, that being the low or heavy E string, the one closest to the ceiling, the high E string, the one closest to the floor on the bottom, the 0 representing the open fret, the one which, if indicated, we would not be putting our finger down on, but rather ringing out as open. Frets 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, the ones where we would be putting our finger down on when indicated in this case by the orange items on down below. We're now looking at the E shape in the G chord position. Let's recap the E shape in the open position looking like this. We're only putting our finger on these 3 items in the open position. These 3 items are going to be open then, simply ringing out as open. The E string ringing open in the open position is telling us what the root of the chord is, and we got this nice full shape. Now, when you play this chord and many chords, any chord generally in the open position, you want to be saying that it's an E chord or E shape when played in the open position so that you don't have a contradiction in your mind when you move that E shape position up to, say, an F chord or a G chord. You can still call it an E shape, moving it up to a new chord because it's an E shape in the open position. As you move it up then, also note that this is a common one that you want to adjust the fingering to be able to bar this off to make it a common type of bar chord. But as you think about that, also realize that you could just simply move up the same shape. You'd be fingering these 3 strings. You can move those 3 strings up here and finger it the same way, and you could play those 3 strings and play a nice little chord that's going to be up there. But even if you do that, you want to be looking back to this item, which was open last time, which is where you'd have to be barring off if playing that note this time, to realize that you are playing now the E shape, but in an F chord position, even if you're only playing these 3 strings up top. It is also a position where you do want to kind of and then you could of course move this up to here where we are at, so same thing with the G. You could play an F sharp too, but we're just going to move it up to the G, so we're just going to go to the natural, A, B, C, D, and so on. So we are on the G now, and so if you want to refinger this, you would like to refinger it so that you have the bar, because many people will see this as simply a bar chord. As you adjust the fingering to the bar chord, you also want to realize that this is still your standard kind of E shape in the open position, so that you're not learning something totally new. It's not like, okay, now I've got these normal shapes that I look at, and then there's this bar chord that's something totally different. No, it's the same thing. It's just that it's such a nice shape to be movable that it gets its own kind of thing. People see it as basically a bar chord, but it's the same thing where you'd be barring this thing off with your index finger, these 3 strings with your other finger, and you can get stronger and stronger at barring this whole thing off. If your fingers aren't that strong yet, just keep practicing, and if you get less than a full bar chord, that's okay. If you're ringing these out, you're getting your chord in essence to ring out. And if you want to play this in some other way, some other voicing, you have a lot of options to do those. So even with just the arpeggiating here, you don't have to hold it as a bar chord to do so. I don't have to hold this whole thing down in order to arpeggiate down here. I can replay my fingers to whatever is most comfortable to make sure I'm going to play these, this shape. That's okay to do. That's not cheating or anything like that. That's fine. You can play this same shape right here. Go ahead and play that, and if you'd like to voice it out that way. Note that if someone is playing a G chord, likely they're not going to be playing the bar chord. They're going to be playing the standard open position G chord. If you voice the G chord this way, you're still hitting that heavy G if you voice the whole thing out, but it's going to give a different ring, a different tone, given the fact that you have different voicings of the notes that are going to be in the chord. You can also accentuate different notes that are going to be in the chord as well as that big full G chord is being played. Let's take a look at the G music theory kind of stuff here. The G is a very common guitar chord to be playing in. You only got the 1 sharp in it, so it's a one you'll see often. So if we take our G to G notes, we're going to say G, do our whole half type of thing. G, whole step to A, whole step to B, half step to C, whole step to D, whole step to E, whole step to F sharp. There's the sharp. Half step resolving back on home to G. So the notes are going to be G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. Back to G. We can name them from 1 to 7. If we take a look at the 1, 3, 5, that's going to give us a G, a B, and a D. A G, a B, and a D. So if I go back on over here, we have the notes, which are going to be a G, a D, a G, a B, a D, and a G. So you got a whole lot of repetition there. You only need 3 notes to make the chord. You also note that you got, again, that same kind of G when you're playing the open position over here as well. So then we're going to add the pentatonic shape on top of this, noting that if you look at the pentatonic shape in what I would call the home position in the key of C or A minor, this being position 1, then now we're looking at position 2, which would be right here in the key of C major or A minor, which is a position you might start out learning the 5 positions of the pentatonic scale, which some people that might be one way you approach it. So now we're going to put the pentatonic scale over the G here, and we're going to have this looking like this. So you might call this then, you might say this is an E shape in the open position, meaning that even though you might be borrowing this off, or you might just be playing the E shape here, you're looking back to this, which would have been the open string in the open position, saying that's the root, which is now a G. So it's an E shape in the open position, and now in the chord of G, because the root is here telling us I am now in G and pentatonic scale, meaning you're applying the pentatonic scale shape in those same 4 frets, or 4 to 5 frets, around that E shape, which is in the key of G. So another way to put it, you might say that you're playing the E shape in the open position, pentatonic scale in the key of G. It's another way you might put it. Many people might then just say this is the major, the major bar chord pentatonic scale, meaning the major bar chord being this one that happens to be an E shape, and this is the shape for the pentatonic scale that would be around that kind of major bar chord. People might see it in that way as well. And now you got different voicings that you can add here with regards to the pentatonic scale if you wanted to try different voicings of the chord, adding or substituting some notes in it to see if that would ring nicely within whatever it is that you are playing. You can also, if a song is playing in the key of G or going through G as one of the chords, you can add to it voicing some of these other items in the pentatonic scale and be fairly safe that you're playing something that won't sound ugly. And then we're going to go back on over to the major scale. So now we would just add the extra couple notes to get up to the major scale position at this point. And that then would be, you could call this, say this is going to be the E shape in the open position in the key of G now, major scale, meaning you're adding the extra couple notes from the 3 to get to the 7 for that shape. Or you might simply call it an E shape major scale, the E shape referring to a chord which only has 3 notes, major scale referring to the full position around those 3 notes would be the general idea. If we go back to the theory then, if you're going to play in the key of G, the notes that you can generally pick from to play your song, then you could pick from these notes and play them in some kind of order, usually hovering around the G chord as the major chord. Usually, you don't have to though. Would be the G major, the A minor, the B minor, the C major, the D major, the E minor, the F sharp minor, or diminished, and so on. You usually throw that one away and just ignore that one for most people, like I would mainly. And then you might just play the majors, which would be the 1, 4, 5, the G, C, and the D. The G, C, and the D. If you were to do that, you can arpeggiate this position, first arpeggiating within the arpeggio of the actual notes in the chord, the G, the B's, and the D's, and then you can expand to the pentatonic, and then you can expand to the major, and you can also then move this shape around as it moves from a G to a C to a D, and that means you can move up and down the fretboard with this same shape and try to play along, moving along with the song as you're moving, as you're changing up that shape. Now, as you're changing the shape, if you're changing the chords and chasing the chords, you'll start then to think about, well, what's the differences between, the 1, 4, 5 notes, and how can I accentuate maybe the differences in those notes? And you could try to see that and change shapes and stuff. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that when we start looking at the shape moving along the fretboard.